Hello everyone, and today we're going to be talking about Sky Strikers with all of their new support, including support we're including from the Furion archetype. So Sky Strikers got a lot of love from the new releases. They got one of their most powerful cards to exist, one of their most powerful support cards, Linkage, which is essentially an additional starter card for your deck, as well as getting a built-in searchable kaiju for their deck. And lastly, they're taking really good advantage of the Furion support as well. Not everyone's playing this version of Sky Strikers, but I think the extra power that the Regulus brings to the deck really helps in patching up some of its weaknesses and making plays where otherwise you wouldn't have had any. Very, very rarely do you see Regulus in your hand and wish it was anything else. So no, absolutely, I think this version of the deck is amazing. I've been playing this version card for card for quite a while, quite a number of hours across multiple days, and I am loving it. I haven't had to switch a single card in or out. I feel like this is how I like playing it, just like this. I might maybe cut one linkage, but like I honestly think that the ratios, everything about this deck is just perfect for my playstyle. So if you want to see what that playstyle can result in, we've got some replays coming up here, of course, as we always do. And we have a full card for card deck profile at the end of the video, so watch the gameplay just so you can sort of grasp the basic sort of combos and grasp the basics of what you're doing, because Sky Strikers is a deck that it requires a bit of practice. It required quite a bit of practice for me to get any sort of level of decent, and I'm still learning as I'm playing. So it is going to take a bit of practice. If you do decide to pick it up, don't pick it up and throw it back down because you know you've lost maybe 3, 4, 5 times. It is going to take some practice, but yeah, watch the gameplay so you can sort of get the grips with what is actually happening, so you can pick up some sort of tips and tricks, and then watch the deck profile at the end to get a full breakdown of everything, and you'll sort of know exactly where to go from there, and you can modify the list however you like. So if that's the sort of thing you're interested in and you want to see that type of breakdown for other decks, stick around, subscribe to the channel. That's what we do here. We go in full analytical breakdowns of decks. We don't just throw a deck list up. So if you want to see that sort of thing for your favorite decks, absolutely throw your decks down below in the comments. I'll get around to as many of them as I can. If I haven't already done them in the past, I've done quite a number of deck profiles up until now. So you're bound to find something you're interested in, so you might as well subscribe. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into game number 1. Already getting into the first game here. Looks like we're going to be up against Branded Despia. Now, if you haven't seen Sky Strikers before, Sky Strikers will always like to go second because they play a lot of very high impact cards, they control the state of the game very well, and they don't have a ton of sort of negates that they can search out and set up for turn 1. We are going to try and hit their Lubellion with Infinite Impermanence, which is one of their big weak spots, but our opponent has the Crossout Designator. Of course they do, they always do. So our impermanence does in fact get negated, which is unfortunate, but again, we will live. The Lubellion then will shuffle back with the Albaz to summon out their Mirror Jade. Then we're going to normal summon the Aliber, then grabbing the Branded Opening before Mirror Jade will activate its effect, sending Albion, the Branded Dragon, to the graveyard to banish it. Now Branded Opening is going to discard their Infinite Impermanence to grab Ad Libitum of Despia from their deck. Then they're going to set Branded in Red to their field from the deck. And there they are, fully set up for their Guardian Chimera combo. Of course, we have the key to stopping it in Call by the Grave. We also draw into Widow Anchor, which is amazing. Furion's Coliseum on activation will search our deck for Furion King Regulus. Engage, then grabbing Sky Striker Ace Ray from our deck. Ray then will be normal summoned and then link off into Hayate. Hayate attacks directly. Our opponent tries to stop that by using Branded in Red. We're going to use Call by the Grave to stop that Branded in Red from happening. That means that basically it fizzles out with no effect. Our Hayate then, when it inflicts damage to your opponent, or when it battles in general, will send a Sky Striker card from your deck to the graveyard, which means that once it inflicts damage, we're going to send Linkage from deck to grave. Now we're going to use Widow Anchor. Because we have 3 or more spells on our grave, all of your Sky Striker cards gain additional effects. So our Widow Anchor gets to negate and steal his monster until the end of the turn. We're going to link off into Sky Striker Ace Kagiri. Kagiri is then going to grab from our graveyard the Engage. Then we're going to link 2 off into Sky Striker Ace Zeke so that we can send the Mirror Jade to the graveyard without triggering its effect. Now we're going to use Engage to grab a Sky Striker card from deck to hand, but because we have 3 or more spells, we draw an extra card. and the card we draw is a second copy of Widow Anchor, which is pretty nuts. We link off into Shizuku before using the effect of Regulus to summon itself, equipping onto it the Kagiri from the graveyard, giving us an Omni Negate on our board. We set 2, which basically gives us 2 monster negates and steals during our opponent's turn, as well as a Afterburners for follow-up, which allows us to pop a bunch of cards. And yeah, there's nothing our opponent can do about this. This field is busted. Yeah, nothing they could do. So the Furion acts as an Omni Negate. The reason it synergizes well with Sky Strikers is because it will end up sending itself from the field to the graveyard to activate its effect, which then will facilitate the activation of your other Sky Striker cards. It means that it's not a massive obstacle to their resolution, which other hybrid Sky Striker decks might have. That, you know, there's quite a few that causes issues. In this particular occasion, they do not. So that's why it's such a powerful mix. And again, you can see the power and the combo potential there, how we're able to interrupt and break boards. Obviously, it wasn't the most intimidating of boards. It was just a Mirror Jade and Branded in red. But still, the basic idea and concept is there. Let's get into game number 2. Already getting into game 2 here. A bit of a different situation. We've been forced to go first, which is not ideal. However, the Regulus does in fact help with your going first as well, which is another big reason as to why it's so useful. So we're going to link off. The reason we went into Hayate first is that we need a machine in our graveyard so that we can summon out our Regulus. So Regulus will summon itself to the field by equipping on the Hayate, which means that in a situation where normally Sky Strikers would really have been rather weak, we now have an additional negate, and we're able to, or we would have been able to, search our deck for an additional Sky Striker card for follow-up should our Shizuku have resolved, but unfortunately it gets negated. But that is what it is. We have the Omni Negate on board. We decided that negating the Infinite Impermanence was not worth it, and we're glad we did, because our opponent goes into battle phase and tries to hit us with that evenly matched. Absolutely not. Regulus sends itself to the grave to negate the evenly matched, which gives us a little bit of room for maneuver. They do unfortunately have the Harpy's Feather Duster, so they wipe out our back row, which is very unfortunate, and then they're going to go for the Quilphort Scout. Quilphorts are extremely interesting because they can be quite detrimental if you can't get set up against them. Basically, they summon out a Quilphort Towers, which is effectively immune to anything with a level lower than it. Now, our Sky Striker monsters are obviously Link monsters, so they're not typically affected by that monster too much, but it's still going to be a problem. So we summon out Rei, we link our Shizuku off into Hayate so that we can inflict some damage here. 1500 to the face, using its effect to send Engage to grave. We attack with Rei as well here. Our opponent flips up their first trap card, we chain Maxi to that, and to our Maxi they chain their second trap card. All we wanted to do was make sure they used both, because when they're activated, they offer protection to your Quilphort spell and trap cards for the rest of the turn where they're activated. So we needed to make sure that he used all of his protection in one turn, as opposed to keeping it for next turn. So we're going to link summon now off into Sky Striker Ace Zeke. Zeke's then going to target and banish one of his monsters until our opponent's next end phase. We link Zeke off into Kagiri. Kagiri's going to add our Engage from graveyard back to hand. So we're going to grab that, which we will now activate, using it to grab Afterburners from our deck. We also get to draw an additional card thanks to the fact we have so many spells in grave. Afterburners then is going to pop his card. The spells and traps are protected from destruction. However, this card specifically is not treated as a trap card anymore, which means Afterburners gets to pop it and the face down, and then we simply set up our plays, summon the Shizuku, and then go into next turn just as far ahead. So our opponent, again, they simply didn't have a way to get past it. A bit of a curious deck. That's why I wanted to include this one. Very, very curious deck to be going up against. But yeah, let's get into game number 3. Alrighty, game 3 here, and we are going second, but we're going second against Runic. Now, I think it is very important whenever you're building a deck to understand what it is you're good against and what it is you're bad against. So what we're going to do here is, this is a very interesting variant of Runic that I really wanted to show off. I'm probably not going to build it because Runic's a very expensive deck type that I want nothing to do with, but this is a really cool deck from our opponent. Our opponent's going to draw 3 here. They're going to go Reasoning. We declare level 2, expecting him to be playing something like Max C. Unfortunately, we called the level right, but he's playing the Fabled Runic deck, which I have seen before, but it spells trouble for anyone. So he's going to use Monster Gate here, checking again cards from the top of his deck to the graveyard, filling his grave to the brim with all of these runic spells. He summons out the Fabled Cerberus, and then using his runic spells, he's able to fusion summon out these various fusion monsters of different levels. He grabs another copy of Fountain, which is a soft once per turn, by the way. That's going to be important. And then he's going to go into Cupid Pitch. Cupid Pitch then will increase its level by 2. He's going to use Runic Destruction to summon Fangs. That'll trigger his Runic Field spell to draw 3. Fangs then is going to grab a non-quick play Runic spell from grave and add it back to hand. So he's recycling the Runic Fountain, and every time he recycles it, he draws 3 cards. Absolutely nuts. This deck is insane. So Runic Fountain comes back onto the field, Synchro Summon into Baron de Fleur. That frees up the extra monster zone, which means he can now activate another Runic spell to summon another Runic Fusion monster. Out it comes. He's going to summon out another Fangs. Runic Fountain activates, returning 3 from the grave back to the deck to draw 3, also returning the other Fountain back to the hand. So he's recycling the same Fountain over and over and over to draw 3 cards every single time. Look at the size of our opponent's hand already, and they're activating yet another Fountain. So they're going to go the a bonk summons itself out to the field, Synchro Summon into the Coral Dragon, a level 6 Synchro tuner monster. They're going to go Runic Slumber, summoning another Runic monster out to the field, and yet again drawing 3 cards, which is absolutely nuts. And they're also going to grab another Runic Field spell from their deck to their hand, which means that this one doesn't recycle one back to the hand from the grave, but it does grab a new one fresh from deck. And of course, this being a level 2 monster, that allows him to summon out Psy-Frame Lord Omega, which is a very powerful synchro monster. Coral Dragon draws 1, Omega snipes 1 from our hand, and then he simply sets 4 and passes. So he went plus a million and has Baron de Fleur on field. It's a very, very difficult thing to go up against. We activate this Furiontis Colosseum. He tries to pop it. We send it to the graveyard to use Droplet against his Baron de Fleur, and we attempt to negate the Baron de Fleur basically, which is fine. That gives us 1 singular negate. But if you look at our hand, he gets to draw an extra 3 cards again. So he's got 7 cards in hand, most of which can be interruptions, like the Runic Tip, which is going to search his deck for another Runic card. So he has 3 or 4 interruptions in his hand, and then he has however many interruptions are currently on his field as well. We do grab the Afterburners here. Before we can even activate it, our opponent's going to snipe another card from our hand. We then activate Afterburners to try and pop our Baron de Fleur, but our opponent's going to go for Runic Slumber to protect the Baron de Fleur. So we're going to quickly chain linkage to try and send Afterburners from the field to the graveyard in order to link summon out a Hayate. But ultimately, there's not a lot of room left for maneuver. We can inflict 1500 points of damage. At this point, we were just being petty. We just wanted some damage. We link off into Kagiri's to try and recycle something back from our graveyard. But when we do, we get hit with that Freezing Curse. We get negated by the Quick Play spell, which of course is very, very bad. Banishes cards from the top of our deck, and we decide, listen, we're just going to try go into Shizuku here. And then when we summon Shizuku, it gets popped, and yeah, there was nothing we could possibly have done there. That was insane. The reason I wanted to show this off is there are certain matchups where you're going to struggle. You're not going to win every single game, and so the worry behind any deck going second is that going second you need to be able to break a board. When you're dealing with atypical boards, you need to be able to modify how you're thinking about it. So walking away from this deck profile, I want you to be aware of the different types of matchups there are and the different types of matchups you're going to struggle with, so that whenever you're building the deck, if you potentially want to build it a different way, or if you have any ideas to improve it, that you can do so. This is just my way of playing it. It has its strengths, it has its weaknesses. There's no such thing as a perfect way of playing it to beat every single deck, but there are ways to pick your battles. So that's what this little clip was about. Again, I just wanted to show this off. Plus, I don't like showing all wins. I think that's very pompous. But anyway, let's get into the 4th and final game. Alright, game 4. Let's get in here. We've got a very solid hand here, except our opponent doesn't actually do anything, which is almost disappointing because look at all the really sort of powerful cards we had in our possession. We're going to go Upstart Goblin, then our Engage, grabbing Ray from deck. Ray goes into Hayate. This is your sort of standard play. You go into green, into red, into blue. That's how it works. So Hayate sends a card from deck to graveyard that you want to add back with Kagiri. Kagiri adds back a card from your graveyard. Luckily we already had Engage there, so we didn't need to search for it, but we actually get negated by Ghost Bell, which got me very curious. I'm wondering what deck they could possibly be playing, where they had 0 plays in their hand, but they had a Ghost Bell. And then we just go into Shizuku here. Now, before the end of the turn, we're going to summon out our Regulus. Regulus gives us an extra negate. Our opponent's got Nibiru though, so the Regulus basically just negates Nibiru, which is fine ultimately. At least we know more about what's in our opponent's hand and what they're sort of playing with. So we know they've got 3 potentially usable cards, 2 now because they've used their Imperm to prevent our Shizuku search. So ultimately, it's not great for us, but at the same time, our opponent's not doing so hot either. They go for Small World here, getting rid of the Nibiru and the Veiler in order to search their deck for Math, Mech, Circular. Circular, of course, being a massive issue. They're going to send Diameter from deck to graveyard because they already had the Sigma in their hand. They're going to go Circular here to search their deck, except we're not going to allow that. We're going to go Droplet, ditching the Lightning Storm in order to negate that Circular. And the reason we negated the Circular with Droplet and not anything else is so we know when he's going to Exceed Summon, he's going to go into this guy. So he activates his effect, and now we can use the effect of Widow Anchor not only to negate, but also to steal his monster, which means he can't use its tribute effect either. Basically completely shutting that lane of play down. So excellent. That just went super well for us. You'd love to see it. We're going to go Terraforming here, trying to grab our Furion's Colosseum from our deck, which we'll now use. Furion's Colosseum grabbing Furion Regulus from our deck. We're going to link off into Kagiri here. Kagiri's going to try and net us an Engage from the graveyard yet again, but we get hit with a second Ghost Bell. So that means both of our Kagiris have been nullified, unfortunately. It still has a decent amount of attack points though, so we're going to keep it on the field and go into battle phase using our Furion King Regulus. We're going to boost him up using the Regulus in the grave, take out his monster, swing directly for 21, and now we're going to start whittling our opponent down. We're going to link off into Shizuku here for the end of the turn just to get an extra search off. We're going to grab Afterburners from our deck to give us some more popping power going into the following turn. Our opponent's only got 1 card in their hand. They're going to go for Math Mech Diameter. We decide to use our Regulus here. We're going to ditch its Equip card in order to negate the Diameter. Now, of course, it still being on the field means that we cannot use our Sky Striker cards, because they can only be used if you have no monsters in your main monster zones. Our opponent's going to go into Splash Mage here, which is pretty good. Bringing back the Diameter. This is the combo lane of the Math Mechs. Even from 1 or 2 singular cards, they can come back from the brink and summon out something as powerful as an Access Code Talker, using its effect to basically boost its own attack points way up, banishing a card to pop our Shizuku, triggering Ray in our grave. Now Ray has an effect that I didn't utilize here to tribute itself, where we could have summoned out Kiana, which would have prevented him from attacking. We didn't do that, unfortunately, because we're not very smart, but he pops our whole field, he swings in for 5300. We could have stopped that by using Kiana. Basically, you wouldn't need it to have Toggle on. That was my mistake. I just didn't have Toggle on. What you can do is when you summon Ray back, if your Toggle is on, you can activate her effect right away to link summon out your Kiana. Kiana then, when summoned, will target a monster in your opponent's field, and for the rest of the turn, that card can't attack. So that would have been a much smarter play from us, but I mean, we've got game in this hand. How exactly do we have game? Well, we're going to go Afterburners first, ditch the Access Code Talker. We then use Rose in our grave, which will summon itself back out. Normal summon the Maxi, tributed for our Hamp. That is 25, that is 15, that is 4,000 damage into 3,900 life points, meaning game. So excellent sort of game there. A little bit of back and forth. Our opponent didn't open up very strong, obviously. They had a whole bunch of hand traps. So while they didn't have a ton of combos, they certainly did have a ton of ways of slowing us down, so I'm not going to say it was a terrible opening. But yeah, just an interesting back and forth game, interesting use of certain mechanics. We could have played it better if we had used the Kiana's effect, but you know, live and learn. It's just one of those things. So yeah, let's get into the deck profile. Furion Sky Strikers. This is a deck. So it is. This deck is amazing. Honestly, I'm super impressed. What exactly is and isn't core in this deck is a very interesting question. The deck is built to be going second, so you would describe cards like Lightning Storm and Forbidden Droplet as almost core. But what I'm going to do is strip the deck down to what's actually core to the mechanics of the deck, and then we'll take it from there. So you've got the double Maxi, you've got the double Ash Blossom, you have the double Lightning Storm, the double Call by the Grave, the double Forbidden Droplet, and the double Infinite Impermanence. So here's what you're left with. Those cards can technically really be whatever you want, but you do want to be including more spells just because of their overall utility and what they bring to the deck in addition to just their effects. Because the way Sky Striker works is all of your spells gain an additional effect if you have 3 or more spell cards already in your graveyard. So that's why you want to be using spells. So we'll start off with the monsters, since there's not very many of them. Your main monster is, of course, the Sky Striker Ace Ray. It's basically just a link 1 into all of your different Sky Striker Ace monsters in your extra deck. She does have 2 main effects. Number 1, you can quick effect tribute her to special summon a Sky Striker Ace from your extra deck. So basically it's a quick play link summon into any of your Sky Strikers, which is really, really solid, obviously. And her second effect is where if any of your Sky Striker Ace monsters leave the field while she's in your graveyard, she will resummon herself to the field. Which is amazing considering she also has the quick play link effect, so you're getting quite a lot of value out of Ray in general. So this is how you're going to survive a lot of encounters and how you're going to slow down a lot of boards. Rose then is the second Sky Striker Ace you're playing, who isn't quite as important, but she does hold a lot of power in her own right. Basically, if you summon a Sky Striker Ace, you can special summon this card in addition. You're not going to use that effect too often, but it is one worth bearing in mind. You can, if your opponent's monster in the extra monster zone is destroyed, you can special summon this card back from your graveyard and then target a face-up effect monster and destroy it. And this effect has a whole ton of implications and implementations across a variety of different matchups. So basically, it's just a case of if you destroy a monster in your opponent's extra monster zone, you get to summon this card back from the grave and negate something. So in general, it's a nice secondary monster to have in your deck off of things like Reinforcements of the Army. It's nice to have an extra starter card to start off all of your link plays. And on occasion, its graveyard effect does actually come up, especially in the mirror match. You can use it to negate an opponent's Ray, but when Ray summons itself from the graveyard as part of the same chain as Rose, Rose can negate it before it gets its ability to quick play tribute itself. So it does hold its usage within the deck, so definitely at least the one of. It does hold a little bit of synergy with linkage as well. If you have both Ray and Rose in the graveyard, when you use linkage, the monster you summon off of this gains 1000 attack points, but we'll get to that in a moment. So it does hold some merit. Next we have the Surgical Striker Hamp, one of the brand new support cards, which is effectively a kaiju that you can summon to either field, which makes it extremely versatile. If it's destroyed by battle, you also get to target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. Basically, you just summon this to either player's field by tributing a monster on that field, so long as you control a Sky Striker Ace monster. Pretty busted. Playing it as a one-of so that it's searchable, you don't really want to open up with it too often. But it is definitely a really useful card, especially in certain matchups against Floodgates, in matchups against Towers monsters. It's just generally really useful. I mean, it's a searchable kaiju, what more do you want? Then you've got the Furion King Regulus, which holds quite a bit of synergy with the deck in terms of combination with its field spell as well as Hamp. Regulus being able to summon itself out to the field by equipping onto itself one of your Sky Striker Aces will give you an additional negate at the end of virtually any turn, which is pretty big because there are certain gaps in the defenses of Sky Strikers that need to be filled. For example, they don't always have lots of protection against Harpy's Feather Duster, against Lightning Storm. Against these types of cards that may be used against them, there's no built-in protection, so Regulus brings that protection with him. So it's really good for that purpose. Also, him being bigger than Hamp actually gives him additional synergy with it, because you can summon this to your opponent's field, and having Regulus on your field makes the Hamp significantly easier to destroy by battle. So you basically tribute one of their cards to summon this, you destroy this by battle, and then this will destroy an additional card your opponent controls. So it's like a 2-for-1 type deal. So that is really, really good. Regulus is excellent for that purpose, and in general, coming alongside with his field spell, it just means that you can put extra spell cards into your graveyard very easily. More card advantage, more spells engrave, more negates, more power. What more do you want? It's pretty much everything. That does it for the main deck monsters. A lot of the spells here are relatively simple. So we're playing triple Upstart Goblin. You don't need this card. You can cut it if you are on a budget. You don't need it, right? You don't need it. But it's so good. In this deck, like this is the only deck, maybe Dark Magician, but like these are the only decks where Upstart Goblin is any good. In any other deck, it's trash, right? But in Sky Strikers, it's amazing because it fills up your graveyard with spell cards while replenishing itself in your hand. Yes, giving your opponent 1,000 life points does hurt more in this deck than it would in others because you don't have a ton of offense. So trying to take out additional life points is always a bit of a chore, but like it's only 1,000 life. For an extra card in your hand and for an extra spell in your graveyard, it's definitely worth it. Reinforcements of the army. Add any level 4 warrior to your hand as well as being an extra spell in the grave. Perfect. Terraforming. Searches one of your field spells while also being a spell in the grave. Perfect. Then you've got Engage, which is the single most powerful card in your deck. This is, it basically allows you to search your deck for any Sky Striker card and add it to your hand. And if you have 3 or more spells in grave, you can draw an extra card on top of that. So it's basically Pot of Greed on steroids. Because the first one you get to search for, and it's not once per turn, meaning you can activate this card as many times per turn as you can add it to your hand, which can, again, in ideal circumstances, can be 3 or 4 times, which is absolutely insane. Even just activating it once is brutal, because Kagiri recycling cards back from your graveyard to your hand means that you can effectively activate this card multiple times if you open up with it. Or at the very least, you'll be resolving it at least once. So Engage is definitely the most powerful card in your deck, without question. We have Afterburners, which is a really good card to search out for follow-up. Basically, target a face-up monster on the field and destroy it, and then if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, target a spell or trap as well. So it just does a bunch of damage, basically. Area 0 is a consistency card, where you can send a card you control to the graveyard to check the top 3 cards of your deck and add a Sky Striker card among them to your hand. So it basically just searches your deck, or the top 3 cards of your deck for a Sky Striker card. Pretty solid, pretty decent. Also, when this is sent to the graveyard, you will special summon a Sky Striker Ace from your deck, which is its main sort of purpose, almost. It just means that you have more consistent access to Ray or Rose. Furion's Coliseum, as we covered off, as will search your deck for Furion King Regulus. That is its main purpose. However, in this deck in particular, it utilizes this secondary purpose down here, where if a monster is destroyed by battle, you can target a Furion monster in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. As your monsters are all relatively weak, you'll find your monsters getting destroyed by battle a solid amount. So this effect will be activating more in this deck than it would in most. So do bear that in mind, that you will be able to recycle your Furion Regulus using the field spell quite efficiently. Plus, again, sending it to the graveyard off of the likes of Linkage or whatever just grants you more advantage. More spells in grave equals more profit. Sky Striker Multi-Rule is a really interesting card. It doesn't really do much by itself, but has a couple of really cool effects. Number 1, you can send another card you control to the graveyard, and your opponent for the rest of that turn cannot activate cards in response to your spells, which is really good because you can send from your field to the graveyard another spell card that you've already utilized the effect of. Perhaps a Coliseum that you've already activated to search for Regulus. Perhaps an Airspace, perhaps Terraforming if you've already got your field spells. This card can basically ditch a card in your field to the graveyard to make all of your spells unable to be reacted to, which is amazing. Then it has another effect where per Sky Striker spell with a different name you activated during the turn while this was face up, you get to set from your graveyard more Sky Striker spells at the end of the turn, which means you can basically recycle all of your spells and use them all twice per turn, which is amazing. However, after they're recycled back with multi-roll and then used again, they do get banished, so bear that in mind. But multi-roll is astounding. You only need it at 1 because its effect, it's very easy to search, and its effect is really sort of hit or miss as to whether or not you're going to have a ton of cards to recycle, but it's definitely a very important card. Hornet Drones just summons a Sky Striker Ace token to your field. That's pretty much it. It's just a token to go into your link plays, and an extra spell engrave. So that's it. Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor is your primary method of control and negation. So Widow Anchor basically target a face-up effect monster in the field and negate it, and if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you take control of it until the end of the turn. So this card has so many practical implementations that it's almost like the main attraction, if you will, of Sky Strikers. Everything else in the deck sort of helps out with it, but this is one of the main cards you want to be using. Definitely very powerful, being able to negate and steal. Shark Cannon, somewhat similar. You can banish a monster from your opponent's graveyard, or if you have 3 or more spells, steal it from their graveyard, and that's permanently on your field. So that is pretty solid for, you know, taking key monsters out of your opponent's graveyard, countering Branded in Red, doing all sorts of things. This card is pretty useful. Only needed as a one-of. It's not like uberly useful, and it's not good in every single matchup, but it's nice to have at least one for you to search for. And lastly, the new spell card, Sky Striker Mobilize Linkage. This card is nuts. If you have no monsters in your main monster zone, you special summon a Sky Striker Ace monster by sending any other card you control to the graveyard, which basically means you can turn any card at all, be it a field spell, be it a regular set terraforming, be it anything at all, on your field. You can start your Sky Striker Ace combo. Pretty good. It makes it really, really good, and you can also activate it as it's a quick play spell. You can use it in chain with other things. So I can activate an Upstart Goblin as Chain Link 1, then I can activate Linkage as Chain Link 2 to send Upstart Goblin to the graveyard, so I get to summon a Sky Striker Ace monster with 0 cost, which is just broken. It's just really good. Like, it's as simple as that. You know what I mean? There's not really much else that needs to be said. So that's the main sort of deck. Tons of different versatility, a lot of different options for you to deal with various boards, and you just sort of build around this exactly what you want to be dealing with. So if you want to be dealing with combo heavy strategies, go for some Maxi. You want to be dealing with big blowout cards because you'll be going second, Lightning Storm, Droplet. You want to deal with back row, Cosmic Cyclone, Call by the Grave. All of these different cards, you just play whatever you want to play to fill in the blanks. But again, try to use spell cards if you can. Getting into the extra deck, we're actually going to cover the extra deck in reverse because it's a very sort of simple chain of summons you'll be doing. You'll be going Hayate, Kigiri, Shizuku. Why is that? Well, Hayate, when it battles your opponent, it can attack your opponent directly, by the way. But when it battles, what it will do is it will send a Sky Striker card from your deck to the graveyard. So you will normally be sending something like Engage. Then, Kigiri. You will link your Hayate into Kigiri in main phase 2. Kigiri will grab a Sky Striker spell from your graveyard and add it to your hand. So you will grab the Engage that you pitched off of Hayate. And you can use it. Use it to search for anything. Use it to grab a Widow Anchor. Use it to grab Afterburners. Use it to grab whatever. So you basically get an Engage that you can activate. And then lastly, you will chain your Kigiri up into Shizuku. Shizuku, during the end phase of the turn she is summoned, she will search your deck for a Sky Striker spell and add it to your hand. So Hayate sets up something for Kigiri to add back to hand from grave, and then Shizuku adds one from deck to hand during the end of the turn. That's the whole combo. That's fine. That's how you're generating advantage. You'll just basically do that once per turn. You have Sky Striker Ace Kiana. So where Kiana comes in is that she's going to work alongside the effect of your Ray in order to basically help defend yourself in situations where your opponent's going in for a really aggressive play. You can utilize the effect of your Ray to tribute itself to very quickly summon out the Sky Striker Kiana from your extra deck during your opponent's turn, which will then be able to target a face-up monster your opponent controls, and it is no longer able to attack. So Kiana becomes a bit of a useful defensive tool. You need to know when to go into it. You need to know how to use your toggle, especially against the likes of Access Code Talker. So yeah, Kiana, very, very powerful card. Love to see it in terms of its defensive capabilities, but you only need it as a one-of because it's purely defense, although you can probably cut one of these other cards for it. Then we're getting into our generic links. There's one more Sky Striker link monster actually, which is Zeke. Zeke then will be able to, it's a link 2, so you'll be using 2 monsters for it. Normally a monster that you steal from your opponent off of Widow Anchor. But you'll be using basically a Sky Striker Ace plus usually one of your opponent's monsters to summon this card out. When it's summoned, you can banish a face-up monster on the field until your opponent's next turn. And then on the occasion you may want to use this other effect, which lets you send another card you control to the graveyard to permanently boost this card by 1000 attack points. Which does occasionally come up. Sometimes you just need to be able to beat someone's ass, and Zeke is pretty good with that. But yeah, generally speaking, Zeke is only really useful because you can steal an opponent's monster off Widow Anchor, then use your Ace plus Zeke to, your Ace plus their monster to go into Zeke. Zeke banishes another card from their field, and then you typically just resume back and either go into Kagiri or Shizuku off of your Zeke. Very rarely will you stick on this card. It's mainly just used as a stepping stone to basically delete some of your opponent's more problematic monsters. Lastly then, for our generic links, we have Nightmare Phoenix, because sniping backer was fun. You've got IP Masquerena, which you will very rarely use, to be honest. You've got Nightmare Unicorn, which again, very rarely used, but this card's pretty important to have on the off chance you need it. Access Code Talker, again, on the off chance you need it off of your Unicorn. And lastly, Underworld, the Underworld Goddess of the Closed World can occasionally come up. It is a card that you need to have at your disposal for dealing with certain problematic monsters, certain problematic sort of situations. It's always a nice one to have, but to be perfectly honest, the vast majority of the time, you're not going to be touching anything in here that doesn't say Sky Striker on it. The rest of these cards are purely just here on the off chance they become useful. So they're not core at all. This is the core of your extra deck. The rest of it isn't important. You never use it. But again, it's nice to have. So it is. It is definitely nice to have on the off chance. But yeah, that is the deck. So it is. Again, that's the full deck. What you play around your Sky Striker engine is entirely your business. Let me just show you the core engine one more time. This is it. Yeah, so this is the core engine. What you play around this is your business entirely. You don't have to play the Furion stuff, but I think the Furion stuff is amazing in this deck. Absolutely, I would recommend playing it, but you're under no obligation to. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say on Sky Strikers. If you missed our stream a few days ago, we played an awful lot of Sky Strikers on stream, so you can hop back on there to sort of see how the rest of the games went. If you want to see more of it being played, you want a little bit more context, or if you just want to watch a bit of nice content. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it. If you enjoyed streams, or you can always try to catch us live, or you can always watch them retrospectively. But yeah, Sky Strikers is one we were playing on stream, and it was a ton of fun. There's nothing else really I have to say on the deck. If you've got this far in the video and for whatever reason you're not subscribed, I would recommend doing so, because it doesn't cost you anything and it really does help me out. Like I said, we're aiming to hit 1,000 here by the end of January. By the time you're seeing this, it may already be done. We're really going for it. So absolutely, I just want to thank anyone and everyone who has been showing support and who will continue to show support in the future, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.